Hey, it's Atlas. Time to sharpen up. Let's get into it. In 1998, a psychologist filled a room with the smell of warm chocolate chip cookies. He sat hungry students in front of those cookies, then told half of them they could only eat radishes. What happened next became one of the most cited ideas in the history of psychology. It sold millions of self-help books. It shaped how you judge your own discipline, and it was wrong. The study came from Roy Baumeister and his colleagues Ellen Bratslavsky, Martin Muraven, and Dianne Tice. They recruited students who had skipped a meal and sat them at a table of warm, fresh-baked cookies. One group was allowed to eat the cookies they were clearly craving. The other group was told to ignore the cookies and eat plain radishes instead. Then, with no warning, every student was handed a difficult geometric puzzle to solve. What none of them knew was that the puzzle had been designed to be impossible. Here is the part that changed everything. The students forced to resist the cookies gave up on that puzzle far sooner. They quit while the students who got to eat cookies kept trying and trying. Resisting one small temptation, it seemed, had drained something real inside them. Baumeister gave that invisible something a name. He called it ego depletion. The theory was beautifully simple, and that simplicity was its greatest strength. Willpower, he argued, works a lot like a muscle in your body. Every single act of self-control tires that muscle out a little more. Use your willpower on one hard task, and less of it remains for the next one. By that logic, discipline is a limited resource you slowly spend across the whole day. Most people still live by this model today, whether they realize it or not. You skip the gym because a long day at work wore you down. You snap at your family because back-to-back meetings used you up. You call it being drained, and that very word comes straight from this theory. Ego depletion grew into one of the most influential frameworks in all of modern psychology. Hundreds of separate experiments tested the idea in labs across the world. In 2010, a large meta-analysis led by Martin Hagger pulled 198 different studies together. It reported a solid medium-sized effect, a D of 0.62. To most scientists at the time, that number looked strong and completely dependable. The muscle model of willpower now seemed firmly settled. From there, the idea escaped the laboratory completely. It spawned best-selling books, strict morning routines, and endless corporate seminars. It handed us everyday phrases like decision fatigue and willpower reserves. You have probably used those exact words to explain your own worst days. Then the theory got something that made it far more convincing, a literal fuel gauge. In 2007, Matthew Galliot and Baumeister claimed the fuel was actually glucose, or blood sugar. Self-control, they argued, burns glucose the same way a working muscle burns energy. Run low on blood sugar, they said, and your willpower runs low right along with it. Drink something sweet, and your depleted self-control would refill again. The metaphor of the tank suddenly had chemistry behind it. Suddenly, the metaphor was not just a figure of speech. It felt biological. It felt like real, measurable chemistry. Willpower was now a fuel tank you could drain and top back up. And that made the whole theory feel like serious, hard science. The most dramatic proof of all seemed to come from a real courtroom. In 2011, Danziger, Lavav, and Avnaim Peso studied I-1102 actual parole rulings in Israel. They found favorable rulings peaked at about 65% right after a food break. As each long session wore on, that favorable rate slid steadily downward. By the very end, just before the next break, it dropped close to zero. It looked like exhausted judges slowly running out of mental willpower. It looked like a genuine smoking gun. Tired judges, their willpower drained, quietly deciding who gets to walk free. The implication was clear and honestly a little frightening. Even justice, it seemed, ran on a full or an empty tank. But then the cracks in the theory started to spread quickly. Psychologist Robert Kurzban pointed out that the brain uses glucose at a remarkably steady rate. A few minutes of intense thinking costs only about 0.2 calories. That is a tiny rounding error, not a drained fuel tank. In 2016, a meta-analysis by Vivian Deng tested the glucose claims head-on. None of the key predictions from the sugar theory actually held up. The fuel gauge was the first piece to fall off the theory. If willpower did not really burn sugar, then what on earth was it burning? The biological story had suddenly lost all of its biology, and this was only the very beginning of the unraveling. The famous judge's study did not survive a closer inspection either. Researchers Karen Weinshaw-Margell and John Shepard found the cases were not in random order. Prisoners without lawyers tended to be scheduled later in each session. Cases were also grouped by prison, which happened to line up with the breaks. Later simulations argued the drop was simply far too large to blame on hunger. The clean willpower story had a much more ordinary explanation hiding underneath. The clean, satisfying story was getting messy fast. Every neat result now came with a second, far more boring explanation. Coincidence, scheduling, or just the ordinary way the world is arranged. So psychologists decided to run the single biggest test the idea had ever faced. In 2016, 23 separate research labs joined forces on one single experiment. They agreed on the exact method in advance and pre-registered it publicly. That meant no one could quietly fish around for a result they wanted. In total, they tested 2,101 participants under identical rules. When the numbers finally came in, the effect had essentially vanished. The confidence intervals often included 0, and the flagship finding did not reliably replicate. Now, be very careful about what this actually means. This does not prove that self-control is somehow fake. It does not prove that mental effort never fades across a long day. Researchers still debate whether a smaller, real effect quietly exists underneath. The story that truly fell apart was the fuel tank that slowly empties. In its place, Michael Inslicht and Brandon Schmeichel proposed a process model. After you exert self-control for a while, your motivation quietly begins to shift. You start craving whatever feels immediately rewarding in the moment. At the same time, your attention drifts back toward the temptation itself. You are not empty. Your priorities and your focus have simply moved. That distinction is not just academic hair-splitting. An empty tank is something that simply happens to you. A shift in attention is something you can notice and actively steer. One version leaves you helpless, the other hands you a lever to pull. Your own beliefs can even bend the size of the effect. In 2010, Veronica Job, Carol Dweck, and Gregory Walton ran a revealing study. Ego depletion mostly appeared in people who believed willpower was strictly limited. People who saw willpower as renewable simply did not fade the same way. But be honest here, because later pre-registered replications of this mindset effect are mixed. So treat this one as genuinely promising, but not yet settled science. So if the tank is mostly a myth, what actually works instead? For the answer, look closely at the people who seem impossibly disciplined, the ones who somehow never appear to struggle at all. What they actually do is almost the opposite of what you would guess. In 2012, Wilhelm Hoffman and his colleagues studied people with the strongest self-control. The real surprise was that they resisted temptation less often, not more. They simply built their lives so temptation rarely showed up in the first place. No junk food in the house and no phone sitting on the desk. Discipline turned out to be smart architecture, not constant white-knuckling. Peter Gallwitzer then found the tool that beats willpower, a simple if-then plan that reliably boosts follow-through with medium to large effects. For 20 years, we were told discipline is a tank. You drain and refill, and the evidence for that tank quietly fell apart. Your willpower does not really run out. Your attention wanders, your motivation shifts, and the truly disciplined mostly build lives where they rarely have to fight. So stop trying to outmuscle the cookie, move the cookie, and decide once, in advance with a plan. If this changed how you see your own discipline, subscribe to Mindset Mechanics, because the goal was never to have more willpower, it was to need less of it. Knowing it isn't enough. Go do it. Subscribe to Mindset Mechanics, and let's build that discipline together.